There's a quiet revolution happening right now, and the people driving it aren't who you'd expect. They don't have more money. They just think differently. What if I told you the smartest move in the AI era has absolutely nothing to do with AI? The people winning the next decade aren't the ones with the best tools. They're the ones who built the right mind before the tools even existed. That idea sounds almost too simple, but history keeps proving it over and over, across every era of radical disruption. When the printing press arrived in 15th century Europe, it didn't automatically make everyone smarter or more powerful. It made the already sharp minds exponentially more dangerous. The scholars, the strategists, the thinkers who had spent years developing their reasoning, they were the ones who seized the moment. The printing press didn't create their advantage. It multiplied what was already there. Artificial intelligence is following the exact same pattern, and most people are completely missing it. The conversation around AI is dominated by features, tools, and speed. Which model is faster? Which app does more? How many tasks you can automate before lunch? And while everyone's obsessing over the technology itself, a smaller group of people is quietly doing something else entirely. They're training the mind behind the tool. Because here's what the noise won't tell you: AI doesn't generate high performance. It reveals it. It takes whatever thinking you bring to it and scales that thinking at a rate that was previously impossible for a single person to achieve. Bring in scattered, reactive, unfocused thinking, and you get scattered, reactive, unfocused outputs faster than ever. But bring in clear, structured, strategic thinking, and you get results that look, everyone watching from the outside, almost supernatural. This is the new dividing line. Not who has access to the tools, because almost everyone has access now, but who developed the mental architecture to use them at the highest possible level. Ordinary people with extraordinary mental discipline are quietly building advantages that defy every conventional success metric. No elite degree required, no inherited capital, no famous last name, just the right way of thinking, applied consistently over time, with intention. The game has changed. Most people are still playing the old one. If this framing is new to you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Let's talk about how history's most dangerous minds processed information, and what that reveals about AI. The most effective decision makers in history shared one counterintuitive trait: they were slower than everyone else when it mattered most. Not slow in execution, slow in judgment. There's a documented pattern across military history: high-stakes negotiation and elite athletic performance. The individuals who consistently outperformed their peers weren't the fastest to react. They were the most disciplined about when not to react. They had trained themselves, through years of deliberate practice and mental conditioning, to create a gap between stimulus and response, and inside that gap, they processed what others simply couldn't see. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome understood this at a philosophical level, and built entire systems of thinking around it. The gap between what happens to you and what you decide to do about it, that gap is where character is formed, and where real strategic advantage is created. Artificial intelligence, in this context, does something fascinating. It makes that gap measurable. When someone with an undisciplined mind interacts with AI, the result is predictable: rapid-fire questions, shallow outputs, constant pivoting, no synthesis. The tool moves fast, the thinking doesn't keep up, and the output, while impressive on the surface, lacks the depth that actually drives results. When someone with trained mental clarity interacts with AI, the dynamic completely shifts. The questions are precise. The context is rich. The person knows exactly what problem they're solving, and more importantly, they know why they're solving it. The AI becomes an amplifier of genuine strategic thought, and the results reflect that in ways that are difficult to fake or replicate. This is the hidden variable no one is measuring in the AI productivity conversation. Everyone's counting outputs. Nobody's auditing the quality of thinking going into the system. Focus, mental clarity, and disciplined decision-making aren't soft skills. They are force multipliers. And in an era where AI scales whatever you bring to it, those qualities are becoming the most valuable assets a person can develop, far more durable than any technical skill that will be obsolete within a few years. The historical record is unambiguous. The minds that shaped outcomes were never the fastest. They were the clearest. Drop a comment if you have felt this in your own work, the difference between reactive use and truly intentional use of any tool. Now, let's talk about the invisible trap most high achievers walk straight into. There is a version of AI adoption that feels like progress, but is actually erosion, and the most ambitious people are the most vulnerable to it. Here's the pattern. Someone discovers AI tools, gets genuinely excited, and integrates them into their workflow. Productivity spikes, output increases, everything seems to be working. And then, slowly, it's almost impossible to notice something else starts to happen. The thinking gets shallower. The tolerance for complexity decreases. The ability to sit with ambiguity and work through hard problems without reaching for an external answer starts to atrophy. It's the GPS effect applied to cognition. Early GPS users found the tool helpful precisely because they already knew how to navigate. They used it as a layer on top of an existing skill. But over time, as newer generations grew up with GPS as their default navigation system, spatial reasoning declined measurably in studies. The tool didn't just change behavior, it changed the underlying capability. AI is doing the same thing at a far deeper level, affecting reasoning, synthesis, and judgment rather than just spatial memory. The high performers who are building durable advantages right now are doing something that looks almost irrational on the surface. They are deliberately doing hard cognitive work without AI assistance, regularly, as a form of mental training. They use AI to scale their best thinking, not to replace the process of generating it. This distinction separates two trajectories that look identical in the short term, but diverge dramatically over any meaningful time horizon. One person becomes exponentially more capable. The other becomes exponentially more dependent and fragile in ways they won't recognize until a high-pressure situation exposes the gap. The ancient wisdom traditions, from Stoic philosophy to the warrior codes of feudal Japan, were unanimous on this point. The tool is always secondary to the person wielding it. Excellence was never defined by what you had access to. It was defined by what you could do when you had nothing. That principle isn't nostalgia. In an AI-saturated environment, it's the most practical competitive advantage available. If this is landing for you, hit the like button. It helps this content reach the people who are actually ready to hear it. Thanks for watching. The quiet compounding of people who think before they prompt. Power, throughout history, has rarely announced itself. The Roman engineering corps didn't hold press conferences about the roads they were building across the empire. The intelligence analysts who shaped pivotal geopolitical moments didn't publish their methodologies. The most consequential strategic advantages in history were almost never visible to the people they were outpacing, until it was far too late to close the gap. The same dynamic is playing out right now in the AI era, and the gap is compounding. There is a class of person, not defined by age, income, background, or formal credentials, who is doing something in private that produces a kind of strategic leverage that quietly bends outcomes in their favor. They're not using AI more than others. In many cases, they're using it less. But every interaction they have with the tool is preceded by a quality of thinking that most people never invest in. They define the problem before they reach for the solution. They identify their actual goal, not the surface-level request, but the deeper outcome they're trying to produce. They anticipate second-order effects. They bring structured thinking to an unstructured tool, and the output reflects that with the precision that other users can observe, but not fully explain or replicate. This is the compounding effect that nobody's talking about. Because compound advantages, like compound interest, are invisible in the early stages. The difference between day 1 and day 30 is barely perceptible. The difference between year 1 and year 5 is staggering. And here is what makes this particularly significant. The mental habits that drive this kind of compounding aren't proprietary. They're not locked behind expensive programs, elite networks, or rare genetic advantages. They're patterns of thinking that have been documented across cultures, across centuries, by everyone from Roman Stoic philosophers to Japanese military strategists to modern cognitive scientists studying elite decision-making under pressure. The patterns are old. The amplification available to them is new. And the combination of both, in the hands of an ordinary person who has deliberately cultivated these mental habits, produces something that looks, from the outside, like an unfair advantage. It isn't unfair, it's just rare, and it's becoming rarer by the day, as the noise around AI drowns out the signal of what actually matters. What comes next for the people who are already paying attention? Every major technological shift in history created two distinct groups, and the dividing line was never the technology itself. When electricity became widely available, most businesses used it to do the same things they were already doing, just faster and cheaper. A smaller group used it to reimagine what was possible, to build entirely new categories of value that couldn't have existed before. The same pattern repeated with the internet, with mobile computing, with every wave of disruption that followed. AI is not different. It's just faster, and the stakes are higher, because the cognitive leverage it offers touches every domain simultaneously. Not just manufacturing, not just communication, but thinking itself. The people who will define the next decade aren't waiting for the technology to mature. They're not waiting for better tools, clearer regulations, or more social permission to operate at a higher level. They're building now, quietly, consistently, with the discipline of someone who understands that the internal work is always the prerequisite for the external result. High performance has always been about this, the alignment between who you are, how you think, and what you do with the resources available to you at any given moment. The resources change. The principle doesn't. What is different today is that the gap between someone who operates from this level of clarity and someone who doesn't has never been wider, and it has never been more visible to those who know what to look for. The outputs are different. The quality of decisions is different. The speed at which compounding advantages accumulate is different. And the most counterintuitive part of all of this is that the entry point isn't technical. You don't need to understand how large language models work. You don't need a computer science background. You need the same thing the Roman Stoics needed, that the great chess strategists needed, that every high-stakes negotiator who ever walked into a room and changed the outcome needed: a disciplined mind that knows itself, knows its objectives, and knows how to stay calm when everything around it is moving fast. That's the foundation. Everything else, including AI, is just amplification. This is only the beginning of what we're excavating here. If this video shifted something in how you see the landscape, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next content goes deeper. And tell us in the comments, which part of this video changed your perspective most? That answer will tell you exactly where your edge is.